continuation of the book of reading the book Devotion from Patti Smith, page 16. Paris is a city one can read without a map. Walking down the narrow Rue du Dragon, Old Sepulchre Street, which one boasted an imposing stone dragon? Number 30, a plaque in memory of Victor Hugo, Rue de l'Abbaye, Rue Christine number 7, Rue de la Grand Augustin, where Picasso painted Guernica. These streets are a poem waiting to be hatched. Suddenly it's Easter, eggs everywhere. I walk aimlessly, finding myself in the Latin Quarter. Then cut over to the Boulevard Saint-Michel, searching for number 37, where Simone de Beauvoir was raised and the Weil family lived for decades. I have a flag of Patrick Modiano tracing one address after another, crisscrossing the entire city in search of a certain stairway. I think of Albert Camus, about to receive the Nobel Prize, making the same pilgrimage to the Weil residence, but for graver reasons, not mere curiosity, but contemplation. A burgeoning routine: awake at 7, café de flore at 8, read until 10, walk to Gallimard, journalists, book signing, lunch with Gallimard crew, Aurélien, Christelle, duck confit and beans, local café fare. Tea in the Blue Saloon, the garden beyond, interviews. A journalist hand me to Simone Weil, translated into English. Do you know of her? Image of her, she asks. Later, a journalist named Bruno presents me with an image of Gerard de Nerval, which I place on my night table. It is the same melancholy portrait I had taped above my desk when in my 20s. Alain and I meet in the evening and have a light meal as he briefs me on our journey in the morning to southern France. A book presentation is scheduled in Sète, an old seaside resort on the Mediterranean, the native town of the poet Paul Valéry. Happy with the prospect of visiting a new place and breathing the salty air, I return to my room, pack light, and then attempt to cajole myself to sleep, reciting my mantra: Simone and Patrick, Patrick and Simone. He imbues anxious calm. She fills me with adrenaline, dangerously familiar. I wake earlier than usual, arrive at the floor just as it opens, order a baguette with thick jam and black coffee. The bread is still warm. On the way to the train, I recheck the contents of my sack: notebook, Simone, underwear, socks, toothbrush, a folded shirt, camera, my pen, and dark glasses. Everything I need. I have hopes of writing, but instead stare sleepily out of the train window. Noted the changing landscape as we pass from the graffiti-scrawled walls to the outskirts of Paris, to more open spaces, sandier ground, scruffy pine, and finally the pool of the sea. In Sète, we have fresh seafood at a local café overlooking the harbor. Alain and I walk up a hill to the cemetery in search of Paul Valéry. We find him and pay respects, but the grave of a young girl named Fanny, who loved horses and bacons, also bacons, and then friends and family have placed horses on her headstone, forming a little stable, undisturbed by weather or vandal. Drawn to yet an older redstone, I note the word dévouement carved diagonally on the border. I ask Alain on what it means, and then he said, "Devotion," he answered, smiling. Dévouement. Devotion. The following morning, before rejoining Hélène and Aurelienne at the train station, I take a last walk discovering a sequestered park presided over by an imposing statue of Neptune. I climb an uneven stone step up a slope that opens onto what appears to be a botanical garden, with a number of squat palms and a variety of trees. As I wander about, an unexpected though familiar giddiness overcomes me, an intensification of the abstract, a refracting of the mental air. The sky, a pale green, the atmosphere releases a relentless flow of images. I take refuge on a bench protected by shadows, slowing my breath. I unearth my pen and notebook from my sack and began scribbling, somewhat involuntarily. A white dragonfly plucked from a music box, a Fabergé egg encasing a miniature guillotine, a pair of skates twisting in space. I write of trees, a repetition of figure eights, the magnetic pull of love. Not certain of how much time has passed, I cease writing, rush past the curving back of Neptune, down the stone step, hurrying to the nearby train station. Alain regards me quizzically. Aurelienne asks me whether I took any photographs. Only one, I say, a picture of a word. On the train, I continue to write feverishly, as though renunciated from a sea of memory. Alain glances from his book and looks out of the window. Time contracts. We are suddenly approaching Paris. Aurelienne is sleeping. It occurs to me that the young look beautiful as they sleep, and the old, such as myself, look dead. A particular joy of good weather and amiable lightness I easily succumb to. I go into the Saint-Germain church where boys are singing. Communion, perhaps. There is a solemn delight in the air, and I feel a familiar desire to receive the boy of Christ, but do not join them. Instead, I light a candle for my loved ones and the parents who lost children at Bataclan. The candles flicker before St. Anthony's holding a baby, both covered with decades of delicate graffiti, what that make them seem alive, animated but the inscribed pleas of the living. I take a last walk up to Rue de Seine, or it is down. I don't know, I just walk. There is an odd familiarity that keeps tugging at me. A long ago sense of things. Yes, I have been on this same path with my sister. I stop and look at the narrow lane of Rue Visconti. I had so thrilled at my first sight of it that I ran to length and jumped in the air. My sister took a picture, and in it I see myself forever frozen in air, full of joy. It seems a small miracle to reconnect with all that adrenaline and all that will. At the top of the square, honored champion, another flash of recognition. Toward the back of a rather pedestrian garden, I recognize a statue of Voltaire, the first thing I photographed in Paris. Amazingly, the little garden remains as pristine, as uninteresting as it was half a century ago. But Voltaire, much changed, seems to be laughing at me. The details of his own benevolent face, worn away by time, appear darkly comic, macabre, and slowly decomposing that he stoically presides over his unchanging domain. I remember seeing Voltaire's cap in a glass case in a museum somewhere, a very humble flesh-colored lace cap. I harbored an intense desire for it, a strange fascination that lingered coupled with the suspicious notion that the wearer might access the residue of Voltaire's dreams. All in French, of course, all of his period. At the moment it occurred to me that dreamers through time dreamed of thus in their own epoch. The ancient Greeks dreamed of their gods, Emily Bronte of the Moors, and Christ, perhaps he did not dream, yet knew all there was to dream, every combination until the end of time. My duties to Gallimard accomplished, I board to Eurostar to London. On the train I rewrite some of the passages of the story I had begun in the quiet parking set, and continued on the racing train to Paris. Initially I wondered what prompted me to write such an obscure, unhappy tale. I did not wish to dissect with the surgeon but as I reread, I was struck by how many passing reflections and occurrences had inspired or permitted it. Even the most insignificant reference I saw clearly as it highlighted. For instance, a perfect plate of fried eggs was echoed in a round pound. I had drawn certain aspects of Simone's countenance for Eugenia, my young heroine, her intellectual flexibility, strange gait, and innocent arrogance. Yet other aspects I reversed. Simone shrugged at the touch of another, while Eugenia blatantly craved it. At St. Pancras International, I took yet another train to Ashford, the last length of my journey, to find Simone Weil's grave. We passed row houses, a lifeless landscape. I noticed the date of the ticket was June 15, the birthday of my late brother Todd, his only child, a daughter called Simone. I immediately brightened it. Only good could happen today. Arriving, I found a coffee stand, then looked for a taxi. The sky was deepening and there was a strong chill in the air. I removed my camera and watch cap from my suitcase. The taxi ride took about 15 minutes and I was dropped off in front of the entrance of the Bybrook Cemetery. I half expected that there would be a little stone carriage house or someone distributing maps, but there was no one, only a groundskeeper cutting weeds and in a veil of light but steady rain. The cemetery was more sprawling than I anticipated, and I had no idea where Simone might be. I walked up and down paths, somewhat daunted. The light was low, only noon, yet more like sundown. I took a few photographs and embedded across an ivy-encrusted tomb. Nearly an hour passed. It continued to rain. A part of me was succumbing to the notion that it was an impossible task, when I suddenly remembered she was buried in the Catholic sector. I found an area with many likenesses of Mary and crosses everywhere, but no trace of Simone. I searched an area dense with statues. The sky grew darker. I sat on a bench, somewhat demoralized. Would Simone approve of this pilgrimage? I thought not, but I had lavender from set in an older handkerchief to leave her. Small bits of France, and recalling her love of her Rome land, her longing to return, I pressed on. I looked up and menacing clouds. I entreated my brother. Todd, can you help me? I'm alone on your birthday and searching for someone named Simone. I felt his hand guiding me. On my right, I was a wooded area. I felt compelled to walk toward it. Suddenly, I stopped. I could smell the earth. There were larks and sparrows, a small draft of light that appeared, then disappeared. And then I turned my head with no exalted pose and found her in all her modest grace. I opened the bellows of my camera, adjusted my lens, and took a few pictures. As I knelt to place the small bundle beneath her name, words formed tumbling like a nursery song. I felt helplessly at peace, and the rain dissipated. My shoes were muddied. There was an absence of light, but not of love. That was the end of chapter 3. Bye bye, see you next reading.